we have Silvan Jongerius with us. He's the CEO of Tech GDPR. And welcome to the Digital Area event. Can you tell us a little bit about what connects you with GDPR? What's your background?
Sure. As a company, Tech GDPR, we help tech-centric customers to become GDPR compliant, so especially companies in, say, blockchain, AI, IoT. And basically how that started was I've been working for a large corporation for a while as a CTO, and we did a probably as long back as 5 years back, we did a data protection project where we basically made sure that we were complying to the German data protection laws at the time, and that's something I led. That was a 6-month project. And for some funny reason, I found that very interesting. And with basically that combined with my technology background and more recent experience in blockchain, AI, IoT, we found a few people that basically had similar interests, and we decided to start helping companies with that.
So you mentioned the German data protection law. How easy is it then to switch, if you're compliant with the German data protection law, to switch to GDPR? Is that a big base, or what's the experience on your side?
Well, in reality, there's not a super big difference between what's called the Bundesdatenschutzgesetz and the GDPR, or the DSGVO in German. There are some more severe fines, some increased risks, but most of the basic principles are very similar. Also, like Germany is, of course, a country that was already fairly advanced with data protection regulation. And sure, there are some changes, but not a lot. However, we also work with quite a few customers in other jurisdictions inside and outside of Europe. And of course, for them, figuring out like how they need to comply. They come from very different standards, different levels of data protection, because that's also exactly what the GDPR is. It's bringing the whole European standard to one level.
So, what is the reaction of those companies that are outside of the EU?
Very different. I think in general it can be said that many of them are very late responders to what is going on, and they realize probably, or they have realized in the last months, sometimes weeks, that they need to do something. And then again, it also depends on their internal structures, their risk appetite and everything, like how they deal with it and how they feel they are exposed to the European market. In general, very different. Different responses from different companies.
Yeah, how do they feel that it impacts their business? Because it might be possible that they have to change the whole business cases that their company is based on to comply. Is that possible?
Absolutely. I think that for certain verticals, if you look at online advertising industry, for example, we have a few clients in that space. They really find themselves at a point that they are thinking like, well, can we still do that? And sometimes the answer is just no, right? And then we typically see them either trying to solve this holistically, or perhaps deploy a different solution for different markets as well, where they perhaps have a different level of compliance or solutions that are implemented that are compliant to the GDPR for the European market, and then based on, for example, an IP address, they do that very differently for the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm. So you help them pivot in a little bit of a different direction so they can stay in business and stay relevant?
Yeah, of course. Like what is important for us is to find a way to align what we see as the key 3 elements of GDPR. That's business, so the business model, the technology, and also the legal side. Where some companies go more into like work with a lawyer and put contracts and agreements in place for everything. We try to take a step back and take a more holistic look also at technology and business, and try to guide our clients towards, if you visualize 3 dials, basically there's this technology, legal, and business. And if you adjust the 3 of them just a little bit, it's normally a much more interesting situation for the business than just dialing on the legal one, right? So this is kind of like the thing that we try to do, try to make small adjustments in all three areas and help them towards compliance using that.
So speaking about technology, what do you think the new technologies like AI or blockchain can support companies in their business models to be GDPR compliant or to implement privacy by design? What are the opportunities that these technologies offer?
Right, I've seen a couple of interesting opportunities in this space indeed. Starting with blockchain, if you think about what is called self-sovereign identity, that is basically where you keep control of your own identity, probably in your own device, and you only have the verifiers of that information stored on blockchain technology, verified by, for example, government institutions. If you use this, you create the opportunity to only reveal very specific parts of the information that you would want to reveal to a party you're doing business with or a club you're getting into, right? So I think this is a big opportunity. Then, of course, there are strict guidelines or requirements, rather, for consent under the GDPR if you're processing something based on consent, to always be able to prove that you have a valid consent. And this is also where blockchain as an immutable ledger can be really helpful with. If you think about AI, one interesting thing that I've seen recently with a startup in Berlin that we are working with as well, is that they have AI looking at existing data sets and based on that existing data set, they generate synthesized data, for example, for test purposes or for development purposes, that has the same kind of properties but does not contain any personalized information. And this is, of course, an interesting idea. You teach a computer how data looks like, and then it just regenerates it based on just the metadata about how it should look like.
So, but the original data that you referred to that startup is working with is a personalized data.
Right.
So you have to anonymize it.
This is basically an anonymization technology without basically through using AI. It looks holistically at the data set and creates another data set that is not per se linked to it, but with similar properties. So you can use or basically build a realistic test case scenario with that.
We just recently had a discussion on AI and AI for social good, using this technology to maybe predict different illnesses or even cancer. But to train those AIs, you need massive sets of valuable data sets, and they need to be anonymized. Is this not a contradiction to GDPR requirements?
Well, if it is anonymized, it's of course out of scope for the GDPR. And I think that is the core thing to look at proper technology and Working Party 29, what actually as of today is called the Supervisory Data Protection Board, if I'm not mistaken, have issued a long guidance document about how to do anonymization properly, because there's a difference between pseudonymization and anonymization, and especially talking about medical data, you want to make sure there's no link whatsoever. On some level, you could consider, but I should be careful saying that basically if computers are looking at your data and just looking at certain properties without understanding the full context of it, it may help with privacy as well. But it's, I think it depends a lot on the details, especially in this regard, about medical details.
Is there any other, I call it buzzword in technology, like AI and blockchain? I mean, they're all valid technologies, but is there anything else that you think of that can be useful in the future going forward?
I think the big opportunities are probably with those. I think another challenge is with Internet of Things, everything connected. Think about your smart fridge that knows how much cheese you eat, or milk you drink, or perhaps beer you drink, and you know, like the more connected things are, the more a potential scary scenario gets even scarier as well, right? So what if you consider that this data may be sold to your health insurance that may then adjust their fee for their services as well? So if you think about how everything becomes more and more connected, I think perhaps slightly late, but perhaps also just in time that we have these laws on a European scale that help protect against many of these things that in my opinion, slightly scary.
Absolutely, I fully agree with you on the IoT scheme. Looking at that, generating the content is also user-generated content if you look at many of the IoT applications. How can we go forward to make them secure?
That's a good question. I think security, of course, in small devices with limited capacity is always a bit of a challenge. But these days it is of course already possible to encrypt data in such a way that it can only be decrypted at another point. So security specifically is definitely a challenge here. If you think about GDPR compliance, some things that are interesting to note around IoT devices is, for example, under the GDPR, you have the duty to inform people how the data will be used. But if there is such a small device where there may not even be place for a little sticker or something that's big enough to contain a link to something on the internet that may explain this, that's one of the major challenges, of course. Like if you click a button but you don't know what it does, for example, right?
Right. And coming back to the security of IoT devices, if they're not secure, what do you think is the major risk in terms of cyber attacks? What are the hackers after? Is it just data to turn it into money, or is it something else? What would you say is the major concern?
That's a good question. Of course, what you see around IoT is that things are more distributed. As in there are different devices containing different sets of data, and in order to access everything and perhaps also to make sense of it, you would need to gain access to many of them, which is a high effort kind of attack scenario. And of course, like by only breaking into one device, that is not so rewarding either, right? I think where the weaknesses of, and this is actually valid for both IoT and blockchain, the moment you start to re-centralize things or you build central points where things connect again, that is where you have your high reward attack targets as well, and this is something to be extra careful of, and to, I would say, also make sure that you have appropriate security measures in place for that.
Okay, that was a great last comment from you. Thank you so much, and
You're welcome.
have a great time at the conference. Thanks
Thank
for joining us.
Thank you so much.